What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones, and AJ, we're here for another episode of the UNC Football Show. And AJ, I talked about it last week on our football show. I went a little bit more casual with the approach last week. I wore a t-shirt, which I don't often do. I'm back in the polo this week, though. Because I see you with the t-shirt on, which you do a little bit more than I do. I don't mind the look. For some reason, I just maybe it's the t-shirts just don't appeal as much to me when they're on me. But I had to put the polo back on because it's game week again for the Tar Heels as they prepare to face Syracuse this Saturday in Kenan Memorial Stadium, 3:30 p.m. kickoff for that one. We'll preview that matchup a little bit later on, but we've got a bunch of other stuff we need to roll through first before we do that. So
I've got some collared shirts over here if you want me to go put one on real fast.
No, you keep the t-shirt on. You can pull off the t-shirt better than I can.
So I can try to class it up a little bit more here.
Nah, man. I like to relax.
I've got a button down. I've got a Carolina blue polo. I've got a royal blue shirt, which I don't think would go over too well in a UNC related podcast.
Yeah, don't bring out the red on it.
Like someone was asking me, I was at up in Alexandria where I grew up in Virginia. We had a 60-year anniversary of the school opening, massive reunion thing this past weekend, and some people are asking me about Carolina gear, and someone suggested I wear a Carolina shirt when I spoke at the in the auditorium to like 1,000 people. I said, I don't own any Carolina stuff. They don't understand that what we do is not as fans, it's actual professional media. But I do have a Carolina blue polo shirt that I wear occasionally on these. Mm-hmm. And I don't want people to think it's fanboy. So you actually see the little dude on the horse. I've got one over here with this guy.
I wear a Carolina blue polo on these quite often too. I'm like, I hope people don't think I'm like wearing a Carolina polo or anything right now.
It's just to divvy it up every once in a while.
Yeah, you gotta mix it up a little bit.
But I do have shirts in my office downstairs here just to change into every once in a while to make sure I don't look like a total dirtbag doing these. I got to class it up some. So
you got to mix it up a little bit. You know, you wear the polos pretty often, switch to the t-shirt. I might start switching to the t-shirt a little bit more, to be honest with you too. Because I don't
cover games in t-shirts. I never have.
Nope.
Always polos, button-downs. Although I have gone quite casual since COVID started. I do jeans now. Remember when you started, I had a no jean rule.
Yeah, no jean policy. Now you're in the jeans.
No jean policy. Now I'm like the jean guy. And also I do untucked a lot now too.
Well, you know, like you said, COVID switched everything up, man. You don't see people with suits on, especially basketball. That's faded away. Coaches don't wear that anymore. It's a different world now. It's more casual after COVID for whatever reason. That's one thing that never came back. But I'm a fan of it, man. I don't mind the casual look at all. And AJ, I'll tell one story real quick. I did learn pretty quickly, I should say, at the South Carolina game this year. I was on the field, so I'll wear a t-shirt sometimes when I'm on the field because it's hot and sweaty, especially, you know, a game in early September. And I wore a black t-shirt. I was trying to be neutral. Like, I'll just wear black, like whatever. Get on the sidelines. Every South Carolina ball boy, every South Carolina fan's just wearing black. I'm like, I thought you guys were like a maroonish school or something like that. Everybody was wearing black. Bad day to wear black. I actually had some South Carolina fans and they were a little intoxicated, put it that way. But every time I'd walk by them in the end zone, they would try to like yell at me and get them to talk to them because I think they thought I was like a South Carolina photo guy or something like that. It was fun. Just from wearing a black t-shirt, just a plain black t-shirt. It's very comical.
I wore brown. The first 3 games this year, I wore a brown polo shirt with jeans tucked in. I actually tucked it in. And I was leaving the house to go to Minnesota game, and my wife's like, see, you got your uniform on. Like,
yeah, you're a uniform guy. You're a uniform guy.
But I didn't realize. I was just trying to stay totally neutral. So for Pittsburgh, I wore that black ACC shirt that I have because I didn't know how far I'd have to walk, and I didn't want to sweat, that kind of thing. So it's a dry fit. So these are things that we actually think about before covering games. People don't.
I think about it all the time, man.
In my world, when I used to cover the whole league, I was constantly focused on, sometimes I'd have to go on trips where I would go to Charlottesville for a game. The next day I'd be in Winston-Salem. 2 days later I might be at Clemson. And I would have to pack according to who I was going to be covering. So I made sure I didn't wear any of those colors. So I wear a lot of brown. because no brown teams in the ACC.
Neutral.
God forbid if they bring Wyoming in, which at this rate maybe they will bring Wyoming in. Then I got to junk the brown shirt. So.
Hey, you never know with the ACC expansion right now. Yeah, no orange this weekend. That's where we'll leave it at that. It's obviously, if you wear orange in that press room, you might get in trouble.
Hey, as an avid Baltimore Orioles fan, I do not own any orange shirts because I just don't think that orange and me go hand in hand at all.
No, they really don't. They really don't.
I like the black shirts and the gray shirts for the Orioles.
Yeah, so, I like that too.
And I have a white one too.
Yeah, you got to, again, we try to keep it neutral for these shows. We might fail sometimes, but I think we do a pretty good job. And AJ, we'll dive into the topics now because we could sit here and talk about t-shirt colors all the time. Sounds like you have someone leaf blowing outside your window over there, AJ.
I have leaf blowing going on right here. Usually that doesn't carry through the mic here. They have a good mic and usually doesn't pick it up. But put it this way, if I lunge forward real hard and put my fist to the window, I'm knocking that cat out.
You might need to at this
honestly,
rate. Tell him to get the hell away.
see, Kim, 4.5 years ago, after Kim's boys, after we finally determined that they could take care of themselves and they weren't coming back, we downsized to a townhouse because all we have is Ellie. And so the community guys, they're doing the work here. I mean, my office is in the front of the house, so they come right up and do the blowing right there. So,
and of course, they started as soon as the podcast started. I
know, and a lot of times they do it early. So when I'm on the Zoom with Carolina football, they're out there, and I'm thinking, okay, get done. So when you and I do our a lot of videos, we record stuff right after the Carolina football Zooms, and I figured, okay, I don't have to deal with those guys, but they're running late today. So
yeah. Well, we did sit on this. We're not on Zoom anymore. I guess we did make the switch to StreamYard officially, just so you guys know. So maybe that's why the mic's picking up a little bit better quality. But we did sit on here talking for about an hour about some different stuff. And then as soon as we hit record, there's a leaf blower outside. So I think it was a planned attack, AJ. I think it was a planned attack.
Well, if it picks up better, that means that you will hear the sound of the house being invaded through the eyes of two boxers. At some point today. I'm surprised they're not screaming at these guys now because we are officially under siege. But Amazon will attack at some point today. So will FedEx and UPS, and of course the daily trip from the post office people. They're to be feared and guarded from, according to a 90 and 70 pound boxers.
The good news is nobody's ever going to sneak up on you guys. I'll put it that way. You don't have to worry about that.
There's nothing in here to take anyway.
No, exactly.
Useless old press passes.
Exactly, man. Exactly. And I guess the Tar Heels will be hoping that Syracuse doesn't sneak up on them this weekend. A pretty good segue right there. I appreciate that, AJ. We're going to talk about that right now. We're going to dive into, we always have, I like to say, a rundown of what we're going to talk about before we dive into the preview a little bit later. Before we dive into the rundown, this show is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. As always, a big thank you to them for sponsoring this show. AJ, let's start with injuries. It's obviously a hot topic amongst Carolina fans. I know a lot of Carolina fans that are always very interested to see, kind of that hour before the game when Carolina lets you know who's playing and who's not playing. A lot of Carolina fans just, I wouldn't say love to hear that news, but are always very intrigued to hear the news on the injury front, as that's always very top of mind with fans. So few guys on the list. I know Mac talked about Willie Lampkin and Gavin Blackwell a little bit earlier this week during his Monday presser. Said they have kind of been practicing, but they will not know if they'll be able to play until a little bit later this week. I know Mac, as you wrote and tweeted out, did express confidence that they will play this weekend. So it seems like they're at least optimistic about those guys. So talk to me about their status, and also throw in Ryan Coe and Jonathan Adorno, because I know those are other two guys that have been up in the air a little bit as well.
Usually UNC will make its announcement. Jeremy will text some of us about 15, 20 minutes before kickoff who is officially out of that game. But we know beforehand a lot of the time, because if you go to our site and you follow our live game chat that we have for every football and basketball game, I'm in the stadium before the players come out. I'm in the stadium before the buses even get there a lot of the time. So we're monitoring during warm-ups who's doing what. We've got you and Kevin down on the field a lot of the time, certainly for home games. So you could find out long before they put it on radio, TV, or we even tweet it out, generally speaking. So that's what we'll do this weekend. We'll look for Willie Lampkin, see what he's doing, see how much he's doing. Same with Gavin Blackwell. We'll do the same thing with Jonathan Adorno, who's been banged up. And we'll keep an eye on Ryan Coe, but maybe not this week because unofficially, I guess he's out for a while, the place kicker. Don't have any idea how long he will be out, but there is plenty of optimism that Willie will be able to play. And I think if they can get anybody who's banged up back, he would be the guy. And I believe that he has been their best offensive lineman so far. The numbers sort of speak to that. If you look at the rushing numbers and sacks allowed numbers the first 2 games when he played and played a ton, they allowed 2 sacks, and they had a 103-yard guy, and then they had a 234-yard guy. In the last 2 games, they've given up 7 sacks, and they've averaged 2.4 yards a rush. So, and if you take away the 26-yarder for Omarion against Pitt and the 17-yarder against Minnesota, they're averaging 1.9 yards on 74 attempts over the last 2 games. So they need Willie Lampkin back. As far as Gavin, they need another speed guy. Gavin, his game is sort of in that little tweener stage where he's trying to cross that threshold into next guy phase, right? The next guy realm, meaning the guy who gets open downfield a little bit more based on what his trait, his natural gift suggests he should be able to do. Yeah. The guy who doesn't drop the ball when he's running a route a little bit over the middle, slanting over the middle some, and the ball's thrown here. It's got to reach a little bit, but it's certainly catchable. He's got to be able to catch that and turn upfield consistently. He could do those things, obviously, but it's just another layer to get to him. Once he starts doing those things, he's going to give them a huge element. So they need him. They need him in the rotation. Some of his reps, I think, went to Chris Culliver in the Pitt game. I think that's good that they get Culliver on the field, but he's not ready to take on a big role. They need another guy that can take on a big role and can be targeted and relied on. And they really want and need Blackwell to be that guy because Andre Green is still in the developmental phase, and they're kind of figuring some things out still with the rest of those guys. J.J. Jones has stepped forward. But for this wide receiver group to be what it can and should be able to be, it needs Gavin Blackwell to step up and take that next step, and he can only do that if he's on the field. So if he's gone through all the concussion protocol and everything else, I would expect him to play and be ready to roll. Adorno should be able to play as well, but I don't have any idea how healthy he is. He's been banged up for a while, so he probably won't be 100%, but I also don't think, unless there's other attrition up front, I don't think they're going to ask him to play 65 snaps either. Yeah.
And obviously you don't want to be putting a guy out there who's maybe not 100% healthy and having him play that much, because that can either make it easier to re-injure it, or you're not 100%, so you just don't perform and grade out as well. So yeah, we'll be interested. We'll obviously keep an eye on that. Keep it locked to our Twitter as well, at Hill Illustrated, because we do tweet a lot of that stuff out either before we find it out officially from North Carolina, from, again, being on the field and looking through the press box, or when we hear it officially. So you can find that there on our message boards as well. So that's a big perk of following us over on Twitter, especially. And talking about, I guess one of the positives is Carolina coming off a bye week, sitting at 4-0. You had some time last week from a Carolina perspective to recover from some of those injuries, get a little bit healthier, and just have some time off, because, as you know, football is an incredibly physical sport. A lot of guys on this team that are playing big snaps are banged up. That's just the sport that it is. So it seems like, from what we've heard from Mac, really good practices last week. I know a lot of the players kind of hung out on Saturday and watched some of the games as well. I'm sure the Clemson-Syracuse game was big on their radar as well, and I'm sure a lot of the coaches were very heavily tuned in on that too. So from the reports from Mac, and even talking to some of the coordinators as well, and some of the players, do you think it was a pretty successful and overall a good bye week for the Tar Heels?
Mac said it was as focused 3 practices. And in the bye week, they practiced Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that's it. He said it was as focused a series of bye week practices as any team he's ever coached had.
Wow.
He continues to say things that way, and he's not a BSer. He's not going to throw him under the bus, but he's not going to heap all kinds of praise on him if it's not warranted. I think that's just consistent with what we're learning about what this team's mojo is. And their focus, their attention to detail, their effort, their communication, their preparedness, all those things are up here on a regular basis. And we haven't really seen the ebb and flow. They weren't super sharp for App, but also give App a lot of credit in that game. And Tar Heels still did what it took to get the win. So I think this is kind of becoming who they are. It is becoming the expectation. Teams and players talk about standard all the time, but very rarely is a standard lived up to, is a standard met. That's why it's a standard. I mean, it's kind of a high thing. If it was here, it wouldn't really be a good standard now, would it? So I think that in a lot of areas, this team is meeting the standard on a pretty regular basis. And the App State thing actually wasn't a terrible thing for them because it kind of reminded them, dudes, you can't go 85 or 90. You got to go 100. You got to go 100 to win college football games. You're not so talented you can just show up and roll over people. So they learned a valuable lesson, and they did it in getting a win that I think has propelled them forward. They've been much sharper, much better, much more consistent in the last two games than they were in certainly the App State game. So they had a great weekend watching games. They were given a homework assignment to watch Syracuse and Pitt. Yeah, now, Cedric Gray admitted on Tuesday that he was going back and forth. That he was watching USC Colorado, and he was watching Clemson and Syracuse. I get them giving the kids homework assignment that take some notes watching Syracuse, but they were going to get the full Syracuse preview from the staff and video stuff.
Yeah, they leave no stone unturned with that in terms of.
I actually think there are two ways. There are two ways a college football player watches college football when he has his rare Saturday. One is you are very serious. You're trying to learn stuff. You're trying to pick up things watching games, or you just have that one opportunity to go, I'm a fan. Yeah. So Drake May and Corey Gaynor, who have become really good buddies. And if you're Drake, that's a hell of a buddy to have if you need a bodyguard, because he's there fending people off. He's
older guy too, man. Guy
Corey Gaynor is the personification of one of my favorite terms, glass chewer.
Yeah, 100%.
So they're hooked up on headsets. And they're not together, but they're watching the games together. They're flipping around together and commenting on all the games and talking about stuff. I would imagine, I told him, I said, we need video of that. I need audio, but obviously put it out there after your Carolina career is over. I think that was probably pretty fun. There was some serious and a lot of joking and other kind of commentary. So they did that together a lot and absorbed football. Gaynor said he had 4 TVs and an iPad going, or not 4 TVs, but he had YouTube TV, which could split.
You can do the 4. You can do the dual screen. Yeah.
And he had the iPad. So he had 5 games going on.
I think is what it's called, but yeah.
Cedric Gray said he's watched as a fan. He watched the Georgia-Auburn game, LSU Ole Miss. He watched Duke and Notre Dame. And I did ask him, I don't know, it's a stupid question, but it's not a stupid question given why I asked it. I said, did you root for Duke? And he started laughing. He said, no, of course not. And I said, the reason I ask is because we post that question to a lot of our readers on our site, because in the end, if you have very high ambitions like the Tar Heels have, you need as many quality wins as you can accumulate. And if Duke would have beaten Notre Dame, that would be a Duke team that comes in next month would have a Clemson and Notre Dame wins on the resume. Yeah. So that would give a lot more value to beating Duke. But when you're North Carolina and Duke, or North Carolina and NC State, you don't do that stuff. You want them to lose because you want them to lose. There's that bad blood, if you will. So I get it. It was funny the way he responded, and you can look at the video on our channel or on our site, the Cedric Gray interview. So that's kind of how guys went about it. Mac just watches games, soaks it all in. Mac will watch Air Force and Fresno State at midnight.
Yeah, he's a football guy.
He's just a football guy. Yeah. He watches the Maction on Tuesday nights in late October.
A lot of people love that stuff, man. It's an entertaining league.
When you're in there in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and the wind at Eastern Michigan, the wind's blowing and it's like 28 degrees. Yeah. There's a little moisture in the air, and there's like 60 students, a couple of parents, and that's it.
Playing Toledo or something like that.
And Mac's probably in there, and he's explaining to Sally about, well, look at that formation there and stuff. So So he watched all kinds of stuff. I'm always a big fan of the press conferences after the open date. I love knowing what they did. I love knowing what they watched.
It shows a little more of the human aspect because they're always in game prep mode during the season. They're always on to the, focusing on what did we do wrong this week? What do we improve on going into the next game? And when you can we can even relate to it a little bit from a journalistic perspective. We're always kind of in that mode too of what did we learn from the last game, looking ahead to the next game. But having that bye week is nice. You kind of just, like you said, get to exhale a little bit. And that's crucial for players, especially, when you're playing a sport as physical as football. You need breaks like that mentally and physically. It's huge. It's
one of my favorite things in life is college football Saturday. And because I'm almost always covering a game, I don't get to sit back for a full day and enjoy it. Mm-hmm. My routine would be like if someone dropped a bag of like $30 million on my front porch right now, and I'd be like, okay, do I have to work or can I just not work ever again? If I chose not to work ever again, my routine on Saturday would be get up, get my steps.
Yep.
And then get all my grub ready for the day and get the dog out for his walk.
The beers in the freezer.
It doesn't bug me.
Nice.
Maybe so. Certainly back in the day that was so. And I would just sit down and I'd sit on my fat derriere and watch football all day long and just flip around. I love it when we get those opportunities during the season now because I get maybe one or last year we had two. Actually, last year we had two because they had two open dates. Sometimes when they have a Thursday game, it's great because we get Saturday. I didn't get mine this year because I said earlier I had to go back home and we had a huge production at our school, our old school on Saturday. So I missed a lot of stuff. So I'm not going to have a full college football Saturday this year, although the reason for going back is well worth it. It's part of the book that I'm writing. So I thoroughly enjoy the fact that they enjoyed and had a chance just to sit back and absorb this incredible thing we have in this country called college football.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and I enjoy those Saturdays too. I don't get a ton of them, like you said, because we're constantly going to games and covering games and stuff like that. But yeah, nothing better than a good college football Saturday. And like you said, I'm sure the players enjoy that as well. It's much needed. Well, AJ, before we move on to the Syracuse preview, real quickly, we've kind of talked about it a little bit over the last couple minutes, but it just seems to be a level of confidence within the program, within the Kenan Football Center right now that. I don't know that, as somebody that's watched Carolina and who's, my dad's had season tickets for a long time, I've gone to a lot of Carolina games. It seems like there's a confidence in the building right now and in the program that we haven't seen in a long time. I don't think we've seen this level of confidence, certainly since Max come back for his part 2 era. But there just seems to be a real good feel-good factor, a real good focus in the program, like you said. The fact that Mac is praising his team. He doesn't do that unless he means it for the most part. And the fact that he's saying we had 3 of the best practices during a bye week that I've ever had, a guy who's been doing it for 50 plus years. Talk to me a little bit about the importance of that, because if I'm a Carolina fan and I'm hearing some of the stuff that I'm hearing out of the program right now in terms of the attention to detail, confidence, focus, all that kind of stuff, you got to be feeling pretty good about that, because those are the little intangible things that maybe we haven't heard over the past couple of years when we thought Carolina maybe wasn't headed in the right direction and things dropped off for whatever reason. Seems like that's not the case. There's a different vibe around the program right now, feels like.
Big time. And we've been talking about this since spring, and it really hit me in the summer. Went over there a few times in the summer, and the vibe was very, very strong in that direction. I had someone in the program say back in May in a lengthy conversation, and then reiterated again in July, why can't we beat TCU this year? Like they've been operating under that belief and as if that's highly attainable. And that has been doubled and tripled down on now that they've started playing games, because I think what's really fascinating is they're 4-0, they're 14th in the country. They've got a schedule that could create a very interesting path for them moving forward. And we're seeing that there may not be 4 obvious CFP teams. And I'm saying this because they're saying it, okay? This is what's talked about within the walls of the KFC over there, Kenan Football Center, not greasy fast food crap.
I love that acronym, by the way. I love that it's the KFC. I had to double take when I was looking at a rundown. I was like, KFC? What? Oh, Kenan Football Center.
But I feel like I have to qualify it each time, because otherwise you think of people eating a piece of chicken with just like grease pouring off like a faucet, Anyway, I guess we're not going to get them as a sponsor anytime soon. But
I think that bridge is big.
Although one of my favorite places to cover a game is I do a massive sidebar here, the KFC Yum Center in Louisville. I love covering
games. It's a hell of a name for an arena too. The Yum,
it's
really,
a great
with the
arena.
Exclamation point. It's YUM with the exclamation point. That's the best part.
With the logo out there and everything. It's fantastic. Anyway, well, I mean, we're part of Yahoo Sports. They got the exclamation too, right?
Yep. I like that. I like the play.
That's the network we're in. So anyway, I think that they've felt all along there's this real calm, cool assuredness that they're really good. How good? Well, they're starting to find out. And I think what's interesting is they're 4-0, the 14th in the country. 3 of their wins over Power 5 teams by an average of 16.3 points a game. Mm-hmm. One was a neutral site. One was on the road. They have, I think, from a scorer standpoint, I think 2 touchdowns is lopsided. They have lopsided wins on neutral site and on the road against P5 so far. Who else has that? I know that those aren't great teams, although I think South Carolina is still pretty good. Although I did expect more from them last week in Knoxville. Yeah. Pitt has obviously got problems, but look, they still put 41 on Pitt, right? So they believe they can get a lot better. I asked Cedric Gray Tuesday, on a scale of 1 to 10, I said, you don't have to give a number if you don't want, but on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you guys right now? And what will it take to get to a 10? And he said a 7.5 or an 8. I think 7.5 is about right. And then, look, we could still close out games better on offense. We could still limit some of the catastrophic runs that they give up. And I wrote a piece about this, and some of the bullet points in there. Think about the fact that Drake's got 5 touchdown passes in 4 games, 4 interceptions. So he hasn't erupted yet. The last 2 games, they've averaged 2.4 yards rushing. Yet they handled Power 5 opponents, right? In special teams, they've allowed an onside kick to be recovered. They've allowed a kickoff for a touchdown. They've had a punt blocked, giving the opponent the ball in the red zone. They had a pooch punt that was poorly done, and the kick was muffed by the opponent that they didn't recover. And they missed what would have been a game-winning field goal at the end of regulation against App State. Like, they've had blunders on special teams. The offensive line has given up 7 sacks the last 2 games. There are a lot of things to pick at. They haven't been totally healthy, but they're getting healthier. And yet they're 4-0, and they have fairly convincing wins in each of their games against 3 Power 5 teams. So, yes, they can get a lot better. That's the vibe there. A year ago when they were 9-1, it was like, nobody talked about Georgia Tech that week. They all talked about Clemson, which was like 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
It was a totally different way of viewing their own place in that season than what you see right now. Obviously, it's earlier now, but these guys believe they're going to get a lot better. And in doing so, they believe they're going to have a chance to beat everybody on their schedule and play for something very significant. I keep using that word to describe what they're doing or what they're looking to do, and it's right there for the taking. And they have the personnel to beat Syracuse, to beat Miami, to beat Virginia, to win at Georgia Tech, to beat Campbell, to beat Duke, and then go to Death Valley with an opportunity to get what I think would be a landmark type win. They have the makeup to do those things. Now, will they get from 7.5, where Cedric says they are, to 10? And it would require a 10, I think, to go to Death Valley and win the Saturday before Thanksgiving. We'll see. That's the next part of this story, right? We'll see how the vibe is in 5 or 6 weeks when that situation comes. Right now, I think the foundation is there. I think the mindset's there. I think the chemistry is there. The communication is there. The talent and the coaching are there for them to do these things. So now the question is, will they do it?
Yeah. And maybe we'll look back at the end of this year, and depending on what Carolina accomplishes, and say, last year was a tough end, losing 4 straight, winning the Coastal, and then not winning again, getting blown out in the championship game, playing a close game in the bowl game to Oregon, but giving up that catastrophic last minute kind of drive to lose it. And we'll look back and say, well, this program needed that. That's what got them to where they are now, what they might accomplish this year. You have to have those setbacks to be able to get, because it's a program and a team and like I said, a program that hasn't even been in this conversation really a lot in the last 30 years. The fact that we're even talking about them potentially doing something big is a testament to this program and the team and what Mac's been able to do since he came back. There's still 8 games to go. There's still a lot of games to go, AJ. I mean, Carolina could easily lose to Syracuse. I don't expect it to happen, but they could lose to Syracuse. Why, like Mac talks about it all the time. If you're not prepared to play every week in college football, you can lose to just about anybody. Just go watch games across the country every week, and you'll see it every single time. But
other than UVA and Campbell, they can lose to any of the rest of their games.
Exactly. There's a lot of football left to be played, but Carolina's feeling good right now. Vibe inside the KFC is good right now. And I think if you're a Carolina fan, you got to be feeling pretty optimistic going in to Syracuse this weekend, which we'll get to in just a second. But before we do that, I do want to give a thank you and a shout out to our sponsor, and that's Underdog Fantasy. And AJ, we've been partnered with Underdog for a few weeks now, maybe a couple months now. We've enjoyed every second of it. And we're very excited to be partnered with Underdog Fantasy. And the reason for that is because it's the easiest place to play fantasy sports. And it's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. And they have so much to offer, including their Pick'em game. And in Pick'em, you pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. It's so easy to play. You just have to pick 2 to 5 stats of your favorite players and choose whether they'll go higher or lower. You can even 20x your money. Yes, 20x your money by just going 5 for 5, which would be pretty nice right there. They also have a Best Ball Mania game. If you think you know football, you need to check this one out. This year's Best Ball Mania game has $15 million in total prizes up for grabs, with the winner taking home $3 million. I say it every time I read it, but give me $3 million right now. That'd be freaking awesome just from playing a fantasy sports game. So sign up today with promo code HEEL, HEEL, to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Check them out at underdogfantasy.com, or you can find them in the App Store and register with that promo code HEEL again to get that first deposit up doubled up to $100. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms do apply. And if you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-522-4700 or visit ncpgambling.org. Big thank you to Underdog for sponsoring this show, and the link's in the description over there. Just make sure you use that promo code HEEL when you sign up. All right, AJ, let's dive into the Syracuse preview portion of this show. Syracuse sitting at 4-1 right now, 0-1 in the ACC, coming off a 17-point home loss to Clemson last weekend. And I think the biggest thing that jumps out to me about Syracuse is you kind of look at that record and you kind of look at some of their stats that they've had. You know, they're currently ranked right now number 19 nationally in total defense, allowing just 297 yards per game, and number 8 in total offense, averaging 507.8 yards per game. So you got defense and offense ranked in both in the top 20, with offense being ranked in the top 10. So you look at those stat totals and you're like, man, that's pretty good. This is a pretty good football team. And I think they are a good football team for a lot of reasons. But I think the biggest thing that jumps out once you dive deeper into Syracuse, they have one of the easiest strength of schedules in the league right now. I've seen some strength of schedule rankers rank them, either last in the ACC or second to last in the ACC in terms of strengths of schedule, and especially when it comes to the 5 games that they've played so far. And when you look at how kind of poor they were against Clemson, I think that's more of an indication of what this team really is, because the current wins with the 4 wins is Colgate, Western Michigan, Purdue, and Army. None of those teams are great this year. Purdue, traditionally a better program, not the same as they've been this year. Army, I know it's a tough team to prepare for in some ways, but it's Army at the end of the day. It's not, some of your bigger ACC opponents that you're going to be playing. So that's the number one thing that jumps out to me when I kind of look at Syracuse. And I think the Syracuse that people saw against Clemson is more of the Syracuse that I think we'll see as we dive into ACC play. Now, not to discredit what quarterback Garrett Schrader's done, because he's been absolutely fantastic in his 5 games this year, thrown for over 1,000 yards already, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Is also, I believe, their second leading rusher. He's averaging over 5 yards a carry. So he can beat you on the ground as well, which we've seen Carolina quarterbacks struggle with for sure. But again, I'm going to focus on the Clemson game, AJ, because not a vintage Clemson team either. It's a Clemson team that has been struggling. And Schrader was bad against Clemson. There's no way around it. Really struggled. The offense as a whole really struggled as well. Just 281 yards and 3 turnovers as an offense. And again, this is an offense right now that's top 10 in the country through 5 games. But when you look at who they played, you have to really factor that in. And it just feels like, maybe the first good team they played is more, like I've said, indicative of what this team actually might be. Now, that's not to discredit Syracuse. Carolina doesn't show up this weekend. They will struggle, and they could very easily lose to Syracuse. You said it a few minutes ago. Carolina, besides the Campbell game later on, could lose just about any matchup coming up. They're not a program that can just show up every weekend and beat everybody like a Georgia is right now, where you're just so good that you can kind of play a C level and still win pretty comfortably. Carolina's not there. They've got to show up and play well to win games. So, AJ, first of all, do you agree with me when you look at Syracuse and kind of who they played right now, that it's really, in my opinion, hard to know just how good this Syracuse team actually is? Because I think you have to take more of a sample size out of the Clemson result than you can from their first 4 games, because they just haven't, it was a very, very easy start compared to what Carolina, for instance, played in their first 4 games, like we talked about earlier. So what are your thoughts on Syracuse before we get into our predictions for this weekend?
Yeah, Western Michigan's a club that's way down too from what it usually is. In fact, when they clobbered them early in the year, I was like, whoa. To me, that said something, but Western Michigan struggled since then as well. I'm also going to say that the Clemson game is a barometer, but how often has anybody in this league played Clemson when Clemson's back was against the wall over the last decade?
Yeah, that's
Syracuse
true.
Syracuse had to deal with that last weekend. They had to deal with a hornet's nest in Clemson's locker room. Who's had to do that? So
it was
I think that
win for Clemson and for a lot of different.
I think that significantly elevated the degree of difficulty for Syracuse in that game. So, and Syracuse hurt itself with some turnovers. Now, credit Clemson for creating those situations and taking advantage of it, but that game could have been a little bit different. I thought Clemson was going to go in there and win anyway. But if you're a Syracuse guy, if you're Bob Costas and you're like, okay, what kind of team do we have this year? I still haven't figured this out. You're looking forward to this game down here Saturday, because that might be the truest barometer of where they are yet.
Good point.
Because it's on the road. It's a good team, but it's a team that still is in very much ascending. So they haven't peaked yet. So they don't know what they're going to get from Carolina, but it's likely going to be something pretty good and maybe move it up a little bit. So I think they might, in Clemson or Syracuse is coming off a loss. So we'll see what they have. We'll see what Dino Babers has. We'll see what their ground game really is against a team that should be able to stop the run pretty well. Pittsburgh had 14 rushing yards on its last 10 offensive possessions. The Tar Heels have been pretty good defensively, especially when they've had to be. Now, that's where the question comes in with this game. It's that 3rd and 8. Garrett Schrader almost has teams right where he wants them. He's run for 21 first downs this year. And we're not talking quarterback sneaks all the time at midfield to get a first down. We're talking this dude rolls out, gives the appearance of a pass, just tucks it, runs, and he runs people over. It's like a fullback in a quarterback's role. So
he's got 6 rushing TDs this year as well, which is tied for
look, the one thing that gives this team trouble still at times is that running quarterback. On Pitt's first touchdown drive, it was a 20-yard run by Djokovic that kept that drive alive on like a 3rd and 12. And they end up scoring on that one. So if Phil Djokovic is running for a couple of first downs against the Tar Heels, then imagine what Garrett Schrader can do. So containment is going to be important. Setting the edge is going to be important. Seeing how Kamen Rucker plays early on against what it is Syracuse wants to do is going to be a very important part of this game. And even though the Cuse may lose Saturday and may lose the following week at Florida State, which is part of the schedule that you and I have been highly critical of, the fact that Louisville doesn't play any of those 3 and Syracuse not only plays them, they got to play them back to back to back with 2 of those games on the road. I think that's just absurd and idiotic that the league has done that. Done that where they don't have that, and Syracuse does. So I think I think Carolina's gonna have a test coming off the open date. There was once a narrative that MAC teams didn't play well coming off open dates. I don't think that's gonna be an issue for this group. They can't afford to look ahead to Miami because the Miami game's not gonna mean a whole lot from a national standpoint, if Carolina loses, I think the 6-day window of noon or 7:30 is kind of that's like a dangling a carrot in front of the mule, right?
Yeah.
You guys win, Miami wins, you're 7:30 ABC primetime. If you lose, you're at noon.
Yeah.
And that's still good because it's still ABC primetime.
Yeah.
But you want 7:30. You want the night game. You want that spot.
Yeah,
this team wants to play at night. Sports writers don't want it to be night. Fans, some want to be night, some don't.
Give me that noon kickoff.
This team wants to play at night because they want to play games every week that are highlighted by the national media.
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. That's a great point. We'll move on to predictions now. I did send my staff picks in on Tuesday. 34-24. I actually remember what I picked this time because half the time I forget. I'm saying 34-24 North Carolina. I think the bye week helps North Carolina. Again, I think there's a different focus in this program right now. I think this team has the potential and knows it has the potential to do some really good things this year. I think it is a little bit of a factor too that, again, I don't really know how good Syracuse is, and coming off a tough game. It's always going to be emotional playing Clemson at home. It's always a big game for a number of different reasons. League play, first league game of the season for Syracuse as well against Clemson. I think that plays a little bit of a factor too. And you've mentioned who they've got coming up as well. I think Carolina wins this one. I don't think it's necessarily a close game. I know 10 points isn't necessarily close, but I think Carolina ultimately, I'm not going to say wins comfortably, but I think it's maybe 34-21. And then maybe Syracuse gets a late field goal or something like that. That's how I see this one playing out. I think Carolina wins by 10. I think they improve to 5-0, have a lot of confidence going into that Miami game, get that 7:30 kickoff like you mentioned, and all things right in Chapel Hill. So I'm saying 10-point win for the Tar Heels.
I think Syracuse is better than Pitt. Syracuse is better than Minnesota.
I do agree with the Pitt is strong mightily. Yeah.
I don't think Syracuse is as good as South Carolina right now. So the average margin of victory over those three is 16.3. They've been in that realm for each game anyway. So I think something like that's going to play out. I actually think there's a chance we could see Drake, from a production standpoint, take a big step forward.
That would be big.
I can see 4 TD passes in a game like this, maybe even more. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling the offense is going to percolate a ton. And they're going to get some big plays. Drake's going to have a lot of yards. He's going to have some touchdowns. And that Carolina's going to win this game. And perhaps in that same margin that it's won the other 3, beating the other 3 Power 5 opponents, maybe by more. Cedric Gray also said, when I asked him about the 1 through 10, how would you assess where you guys are right now? He also said, and I'm paraphrasing, we haven't whooped anybody yet from beginning to end. And at some point, we're going to whoop a pretty good team from beginning to end. I think this stacks up as a game where if it's going to happen to a non-UVA or Campbell, because UVA is awful this year, that this looks like a game to me in which that could happen.
Agreed.
And I think that they're building toward that. They're going to do that to somebody, and it could well be this weekend. Now, I've not made my final picks yet. I haven't gone in there. I haven't even opened the emails, the return emails I sent to everybody about getting in your staff picks. So I don't even know what you wrote.
I got mine in yesterday. I got mine. I'm trying to look out for it.
You and Dean are always quick. The others, no. Like, Brandon P's got to look at his damn email more. So does Trey. But anyway, they know it's coming. It's not like we don't. We'll just do.
Yeah, it's not like we do it every week. Yeah,
we'll do it for the Campbell game. Jeez, come on. So anyway, I think they're going to win. I think it's going to be fairly convincing. I think this is a good team that is wholly determined on getting better each week. I think they will show that in this game. It'll be a fairly comfortable victory for the Tar Heels.
I agree, AJ. I think a lot of Carolina fans will be excited to hear that as well. And again, 3:30 p.m. kickoff in Kenan Stadium. I believe the game's on ESPN. I put my hand up. I forgot to write it down in my notes, but it is ESPN. Okay, I thought it was on ESPN. So it'll be a fun one. I expect it to be a really good crowd there. I believe the game is sold out. I think Carolina announced this week that it is officially sold out. So I'm sure it'll be another really good crowd. 3:30 kickoff. Can't complain about that. I think the weather is supposed to be pretty good. I'm doing a live weather check for us right now, AJ. Let's see. Yep, 70 degrees and sunny, partly cloudy. I mean, if that ain't great football weather, I don't know what great football weather is. So looking forward to that. It won't be 1,000 degrees on that turf on Saturday like it has been for a couple games this season. The last one against Minnesota was brutal in the first half. I was drenched in sweat. Second half was all right, but that turf, don't anybody tell you turf doesn't get 10 degrees hotter. I know we, in our last show, had a big campaign about bring grass fields back to college football and sports in general. That's another reason you need to bring grass back, because it's just absolutely brutal out there on a hot day. So 70 degrees, partly cloudy, should be a packed Kenan Stadium on Saturday, and we'll see if the Tar Heels can go 5-0. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Make sure you guys keep it locked at TarIllustrated.com. We will be doing our ACC Look Ahead podcast as well. This week in the ACC is what we call it, so stay tuned for that. That'll be coming out on Thursday afternoon too. So make sure you keep it locked. Make sure you subscribe, and make sure you go ahead and become a premium subscriber on TarIllustrated.com. Only $33 a month. Great time to do so with basketball just around the corner, and Basketball Media Day coming up on Friday as well. So if you want to get some more tidbits from that, head on over, links below, and sign up for just $8.33 a month. Big thank you to Underdog Fantasy as well. Links in the description. Make sure you use that promo code HEAL to get your deposit doubled up to $100. Y'all know the drill. Like, share, subscribe. Hit the notification bell too, so you know every single time we upload. See y'all the next time. Thanks.
Thanks.